Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlawn Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlawn Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Access to Democracy. I'm your guest host today, Steve Francisco, and I'm very pleased to welcome our special guest today, Michele Kimball, the Executive Director of AARP Minnesota. Michele, welcome to Access to Democracy.
Thank you.
And as we were just discussing in the hallway before the show, it seems that you're a return visitor, but it's been a few years since we've had you on the show.
It has definitely been a few years. I'm happy to be here again.
Thank you, and we're happy to have you back. The 2010 census tells us that there are some 40.3 million Americans who are, or about 13% of the U.S. population that are 65 and older, and that with the pending retirement or aging of the baby boom generation, of which I'm a part of myself, that this is the largest growing demographic group in America and is going to be getting larger over the coming years. Can you tell us for a few moments, what are some of the changes that you see on the horizon as Minnesota's population ages and as our country becomes older?
Well, we are definitely aging as a society, and part of the changes that we'll be seeing coming down the road are in our healthcare system especially. And we really need to begin to address costs in the healthcare system. We need to get a better handle on long-term care. We need to address older workers. People are working longer. They're no longer really able to afford to retire at the earlier ages.
And we're expecting people are going to be living longer too.
Well, yes, and that's exactly
healthier.
Exactly, and that's why they're living longer. Why they are continuing to stay in the workforce. They're living longer. They're healthier. That's a good thing. But it's also expenses are increasing, and we do have a demographic problem in that we do not have many younger workers that will be in the system to ensure that there is enough ongoing funding for programs such as Medicare and Social Security. So we have some solvency issues that need to be addressed in the long term.
Which we'll be talking about in more detail over the next few minutes. But you know, I guess I really should get started at the beginning and ask you, tell us briefly about AARP Minnesota. What is it? What does AARP Minnesota do on behalf of seniors here in our state?
Oh, thank you. AARP in Minnesota represents roughly 700,000 individuals over the age of 50 and their families. And my office here in St. Paul only focuses on advocacy and education. We have nothing to do with membership or products or services. It's strictly advocacy and education, and we advocate on behalf of those over the age of 50 and their families around a number of key issues. Long-term care, as I mentioned, home health care especially, because this is where people want to receive care, they want to age in place. We also focus on health care in general. We look at consumer fraud. We do a lot of consumer protection. We do a lot of education around many, many different topics, everything from age discrimination, older workers, fraud in all aspects, identity theft, things of those nature. Social Security, we do some programs around Social Security.
Medicare, Medicaid issues?
Absolutely, Medicare and Medicaid, and those are our top issues.
It doesn't sound sound like you have much time to sit around and twiddle your thumbs there. It sounds like you have
no.
a very busy office. And how many people
We
work
are.
with you, Michele, that help you with your advocacy work?
Yes, well, I have 7 employees in the office, but around 2,500 volunteers throughout the state. Many of them actually do our driver safety program and also help those who are lower income with taxes. We have a tax aid program. And those tax aid program is free of charge. There is a nominal fee for driver safety, and we do have thousands of volunteers who help us with that, with advocacy. We have chapters throughout the state. There is much happening, and we do have an information center at the Mall of America.
Oh, very good. And
Yes.
is AARP Minnesota, do you find your membership is continuing to grow as the population gets older too? Do you
It
see a
is.
lot of new members coming to join the organization?
We do. It has definitely grown, especially since I've gotten here back in 2000. We've really seen it take off, and that is wonderful and that's exciting. Although I do see a little resistance when people are turning 50 because they don't feel as though they're old enough to join AARP yet.
I have to tell you a short story that the other day, or recently, I was at a restaurant, and the server, she asked me, she said, "Sir, are you a senior?" And it actually took me, I was taken aback a little bit because I thought, that's the first time in my life anyone has actually asked me that. But it really reminded me that a lot of people my age, as we get older, we're going to be needing more health care services. Some of us are looking at buying long-term care insurance to take care of our
Absolutely.
health care needs as we get older. So really, the baby boom generation changing, getting older, is really going to change our country and our state in some really profound ways.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Social Security. You know, it wasn't that long ago, a few years back in 2005, that the Bush administration had a proposal to partially privatize Social Security. And they were basically asking Congress to approve legislation that would have allowed people to divert part of the taxes that they pay for Social Security into private investments and things such as this. What was AARP's position on that? How did you look at the whole privatization issue?
We were vehemently opposed to privatizing Social Security. We feel very strongly, even today, that pulling money out of this secure program would not only undermine the program, but it might leave and would leave many seniors who rely solely on Social Security for income in their older years without that secure income, without adequate funding to live their day-to-day lives. And as we have seen in the last 4 or 5 years, if that had happened and people were allowed to pull their money out of Social Security and into the private market, private stock market, that many millions of people would have been left without any income or very little.
And also we hear a lot of discussion in Congress and among some of our politicians running for president right now that they're concerned about the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund. If we had followed President Bush's advice and allowed people to divert money out of the Social Security Trust Fund, wouldn't that have accelerated the date when Social Security would not be able to pay 100% of the promised benefits?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Some estimates were 10 years sooner, maybe even sooner than that. And right now, Social Security is 100% solvent through 2033. And it can pay 100% of benefits until then. And after that, for another roughly 20 years, it can pay 75% of benefits.
So when people say Social Security is on the verge of bankruptcy, it's going to go broke, that just isn't the case.
No, that is not the case at all.
But the good news is there are ways for us to address that problem other than just looking at slashing benefits.
Right. The good news is we have time today to address the problem now. We know it's a problem. We know in 2033 that Social Security will only be able to pay 75% of benefits. But that's 21 years from now. So why not start today? Let's have the discussion. AARP has been going around Minnesota, for example, doing an initiative called You've Earned a Say, where we are listening to our members. We're putting on the table all of those solvency solutions that are being offered by elected officials in Washington, and we're asking our members, what do you think? What do you see as the way to ensure the solvency of the Social Security program from 2033 on?
Onward. I suspect this issue has come up in some of these discussions you've been having around the state. I understand that for this year in 2012, the maximum taxable earnings for Social Security is $110,100.
That's correct.
So basically, if you make $110,100, you are paying Social Security taxes basically on 100% base of your income.
Exactly.
But if you are a multimillionaire or Bill Gates and you're a billionaire, you're actually only paying on a fraction of your income. So one of the options for ensuring the long-term solvency of Social Security could be to raise that base of taxable earnings. How does AARP feel about that as a potential option?
I can tell you we have not taken any formal positions on any options yet. That's part of the You've Earned a Say initiative. We really want to hear from our members what they think before our board of directors, our volunteer board of directors, makes a final decision on those approaches that we will support. But I can tell you what I am hearing in every single forum we have held throughout the state, and we have held roughly 45 of them, and we have talked to thousands of people in person. Without a doubt, without almost unanimously, every single person has raised their hand when we have said or written down they would support raising the cap or eliminating the cap altogether. And that is an issue that is almost unanimous across the board. There are very few who would not want to do that.
And I don't know what the numbers would be, but I've seen policy analyses that say that you could actually go a very long way, 70, 80% of the way toward covering the projected shortfall beyond 2030.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that would definitely be an option that would be out there too. One of the issues that's come up recently too, and I know a lot of our seniors are concerned about, is the cost of living adjustment. And recently there was a determination about the COLA that will be paid to Social Security beneficiaries, and it is, drum roll please.
Oh gosh, okay. It is just over 1%.
Right. I think I saw about 1.5% was the figure I saw. So it's pretty small actually.
It is. It's typically been around 2.5% to 3%.
And up until a couple of years ago, that wasn't automatic that they would pay the COLA, that in federal law there used to be a trigger for payment of the COLA, wasn't there? I think it was, inflation had to be, was it 3%, 2.5, 3%?
It was 3%.
3%.
And I can tell you that for 2 years there was no COLA.
Right.
And that was very hard. That was very difficult. It hit many seniors very hard, especially women. There are a majority of those on Social Security over the age of 65 living at or just below the poverty line are women. They are, without a doubt, many of them, this is their only income. And so not having a COLA hits very hard because your heating costs continue to rise, your prescription drug costs continue to rise.
And your income isn't.
And your income isn't, and so that is very difficult.
One of the issues too that some people have been concerned about, there has been a payroll tax holiday in place for the Social Security payroll tax, basically where people have not been paying into that trust fund. The government's been making up that difference, as I understand it, from general revenue.
Right.
AARP recently took a position that there should be no further extension of the federal Social Security payroll tax holiday. And why is that AARP's position now?
Because it does not help solvency one bit. We think we need to continue, we need to go back to paying into the trust fund to make sure that the program stays stable through 2033. We are a little concerned that if we continue with the payroll tax holiday that solvency date might get moved up. So we want to go back to what we were doing before ensure the stability of the program continues through 2033 as is currently indicated, and that the program continues to pay benefits 100%.
Right. And to be fair, we should explain too that the rationale for the payroll tax holiday was to put a little more money back into taxpayers' pockets so that they would turn around and spend it during the recession.
Exactly.
It does seem that we're coming out of the recession. We have a long way to go yet, but the economy definitely looks a lot brighter today than it did in the fall of 2008 or 2009.
Exactly, and this is the perfect time to go back to where we were before to ensure that that program stays stable. As I indicated at the beginning of the program, we have a problem with our demographics. We have fewer workers that are coming into the system that will continue to be paying that payroll tax for those seniors in 2033.
Supporting a larger population, much larger population of retirees.
Exactly.
Let's switch gears for a minute to another important issue for our seniors, Medicare.
Yes.
There's been a lot of discussion about the so-called Ryan budget. The current vice presidential candidate and Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, who is also the chairman of the House Budget Committee, developed a budget proposal in the spring of 2011 that attracted a lot of attention, and much of it very critical, basically restructuring the Medicare system so it would no longer be a fee-for-service type payment.
Right.
But Democrats said he was creating a voucher. Ryan said we'd rather give money to Medicare recipients and let them buy insurance in the private marketplace. What are your thoughts about the Ryan budget plan? Now, we should say, too, to be fair, that was his proposal in 2011. He has significantly changed it in the latest iteration of the budget that passed the House, but there's still this basic restructuring of Medicare, moving it away from a guaranteed benefit. What does AARP think about that?
If seniors could afford private insurance, Medicare would not be necessary. Medicare was created in 1965 because the insurance market could not provide a product that was affordable to those who were over the age of 65. And there were many, many, many seniors, millions and millions, living on fixed incomes who went without health insurance because it was unaffordable. Medicare was created to fill that gap. And if you were to go with the Ryan plan, which AARP is opposed to, you would force all of these people back into the private market. I believe under the 2011 plan, it was a $500 voucher. Good luck finding private insurance that is $500 a year, that will not increase from year to year, that provides the outstanding benefits that the Medicare program currently provides, plus prescription drug coverage, plus home health care, even though it's not extensive, it's there, the hospitalization, and so forth. And if that were available, today in an affordable way, you wouldn't need Medicare, but the reality is else.
And this year, hasn't Congressman Ryan also said, well, if you want to stay on traditional Medicare, we're going to let you do that. But doesn't that raise the danger that what you're really going to be left with in Medicare are the oldest, sickest people?
Absolutely, it could.
Yeah, it could and could drive up the cost. But the other side of the coin is that if you just give people basically a voucher, some money, $500 per recipient, and say, good luck getting health care, they may find, they're almost certainly going to find that $500 isn't going to buy them very much at all.
That is exactly right. And I can tell you in our town halls and our discussions we have been having with AARP members around the state, regardless of their political party, they are opposed to this plan. People like the Medicare program. They are eager to join it when they turn age 65. They do have private insurance options under Medicare. It's called Medicare Part C. It's Medicare Advantage. Across the board, people are pleased with the Medicare program and are pleased to be a beneficiary of it. And so we believe, they believe, Medicare needs to stay in place. It needs to be solvent. We need to address the current financial issues within the program, but not to do away with the program as we know it.
Right. It's very interesting and I think very disturbing that the first reaction of many of our political leaders is to say, well, we just need to take a cuts-only approach. that's going to get us take care of these programs and save them without thinking about the consequences of how these really affect people in the real world. Let's talk about Medicaid for a quick moment too. Now, as many of our viewers understand, Medicaid is a program primarily for low-income people, but we also have a growing number of people who are not yet old enough to qualify for Medicare, but they are eligible for Medicaid right now. And it seems that the proposals coming out of Washington, the Ryan budget in particular, wanted to block grant this program. Right now, the federal government, as you know, Michelle, pays 50% of the costs and the state pays 50% of the costs. But under the Ryan budget, states like Minnesota would be given a set amount of money, and regardless of whoever qualifies, once the state has spent that money, you'd be out of luck.
You're done, exactly. This would create a significant change in the Medicaid system in Minnesota, as it would with states across the board. There would have to be a cutting of budgets, a cutting of programs, a cutting of benefits, and a cutting of people who are eligible. And that could create significant hardship for many, many low-income individuals, but not just low-income. Those under the age of 65 who are of a certain low income can qualify for Medicaid, and that really helps take the burden off the healthcare system in general, because those individuals have coverage and therefore are treated sooner and do not have lengthy, more expensive health conditions, and that helps save healthcare costs overall. Those who are over the age of 65 who qualify for Medicaid, they qualify for Medicaid because they need long-term care services and have spent down. And we are worried that those would be the first people to be cut from the program. So long-term care would significantly go away. There would be a significant reduction in long-term care services.
AARP has worked on healthcare reform issues since the organization began.
Yes,
basically
since 1958
when it was created.
Absolutely.
All through the 60s, all through the 70s, and up to the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which your organization ended up supporting.
Exactly.
During the development of the Affordable Care Act, there was an issue about whether or not a public option would be created, basically a single payer portion that people could opt into. But AARP took a position in opposition to that. Can you explain why?
We didn't take a position opposing single payer, we just did not support it.
Did not support it?
We did not support it. We decided to work within the proposals that were available to ensure that people had access to affordable coverage and that Medicare was shored up, and that there were certain changes in the current private insurance market that would allow more people to come into it, such as capping or doing away with pre-existing conditions, and lifting the cap on insurance.
Lifetime limits.
Lifetime limits,
right.
Exactly. And you know, creating a more even financial premium for women and men over the age of 50. Currently, women pay a higher premium because of the potential for breast cancer and cervical cancer.
And the Affordable Care Act that passed Congress, which Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan and many Republicans want to repeal, we would lose all of that, wouldn't we, if that law were to be repealed?
That could be devastating to millions. And I think a lot of people don't understand just what good things there are in this. You know, I will say that there are still some things that need to be addressed. Overall, healthcare costs in our current system, there's much more to be done there, but repealing it would mean doing away with pre-existing condition
the screenings for mammograms and prostate cancer and other things.
And all of the preventive health care is free. I mean, that is really outstanding. And people aren't aware quite yet because everything has not been put into place yet. 2014, The Affordable Care Act will be fully implemented.
And one of the most important aspects
Right.
is the creation of the state-based health insurance exchanges, which
Absolutely.
Minnesota, thankfully, is moving forward to establish with the leadership of Governor Dayton and the legislature.
Yes.
It's going to be real important to have a process where people can pick and choose among plans, to compare plans and pick the plan that's best for them and their families.
And that it's affordable. I mean, that is the big thing. That this is what has kept people out of the market, that has left people uninsured.
Now, recently, Governor Romney has made the comment, well, you know, some of the parts of the Affordable Care Act I actually like. He has said this. He's been quoted as saying, you know, parents being allowed to carry their children up to age 26.
That's huge.
Not letting, you know, pre-existing conditions be a barrier to people getting insurance. But of course, the interesting thing is that when his party was in control of the U.S. Congress, they didn't do any of those things.
They did not. They did not. They opposed it, which was very disheartening.
And if the Affordable Care Act were repealed, we'd lose all of that because they
We
don't
would.
have another proposal on the table right now to replace it with.
Not that I understand at this point. And I think it's hard to take something away from people once they have it. And I think that there might be a bit of a backlash from the public if they have those opportunities taken away.
Well, I see our time is dwindling down, but I do want to touch on a more local issue while we have you here today too, Michelle. As you know, and our viewers know, Minnesotans are going to the polls just in a matter of a few days from now, and they're being asked to vote on a constitutional amendment requiring them to present a valid photo identification at the polling place before they are allowed to vote. AARP Minnesota, along with many other organizations in the state of Minnesota, former Governor Arne Carlson, many political leaders from both sides of the aisle, have come out against this constitutional amendment.
Yes.
Why is AARP opposing the voter ID amendment and urging Minnesotans to vote no?
This amendment, as it is being offered, is simply wrong. It was not done in a way that would not disenfranchise a single voter, and that's the issue. We have roughly 64,000 seniors that have given up their valid government ID.
So like their driver's license, they may never have had a U.S. passport or don't have a valid one now.
Exactly, or maybe they never had a driver's license to begin with. And just going through the hoops that one must go through to get the proper papers and proper identification in order to get that valid ID, a birth certificate, for example. Many seniors in their 80s and 90s were born at a time that birth certificates may not have been regularly issued, especially if they were born at home, on a farm, etc. Going through that, women who have been married or divorced would have to go and get their marriage certificates, their divorce decrees, that kind of thing. Not to mention the cost, not just to the individual.
It really puts the burden of proof on the voter, on citizens, to show that they're qualified to vote rather than government to say you're not qualified to vote.
Well,
and also
exactly.
a photo ID requirement may prevent voter impersonation, but it really does nothing to prevent so-called fraud, of which Minnesota historically has had very little.
We have had very little fraud. We have had very little voter impersonation, none as a matter of fact. And in fact, in the 2008 election, where with Coleman and Franken, where every single vote was recounted, they did not find a single instance of voter fraud. This would put a very heavy burden on not only seniors, but others who don't have valid government IDs. Not
Michelle,
only to
as
mention
always, we've run out of time. Come back and visit us again
Thank
sometime.
you.
Thank
I
you
would
so
love
much.
to.
Michele Kimball, Executive Director, AARP Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
you.